Hi, this is Meg Riley, today coming to you from bright and early Portland, Oregon, where I'm now sympathizing with Aisha Hauser, being a little sleepy each week when we do this. I'm excited to say that today we have Reverend Keith Kron to talk about the UUA search process, a topic of a lot of speculation right now for many people. And let's have our regulars introduce themselves.
I'm Hank Purse, and I'm speaking to you from lovely Milton, Massachusetts.
I'm Bob LaValle, calling in from Buffalo, New York.
And Keith, let's just have a little sympathy for him at the beginning. He has to hold an iPad through this. So all of his tennis workouts are going to be paying off as he tries to keep that iPad
Strengthen
level.
his forearms.
Well, those are so about the legs. So this I'll be working my arms out today.
You should be holding it between your feet.
and doing crunches, right? Doing crunches in a chair. Just.
Yeah, Hank, will you join me? I mean,
yes, okay. Out of sympathy, I too will be. I look like one of those weird birds you put in the edge of the cup that dips down. Right.
You do. Hank, you do look like one of those birds. I never thought of that before. Thank you. You should make yourself a social media little thing that does that.
It'll be a giveaway at at GA.
Taking communion.
That's great.
Well,
I'll get the silver out of it. I'll get the silver out of the MFA, and I'll set one of those things up on our $1 million cup that goes in.
There you go. There you go. Well, what's up where you are, Hank? You're just back from the Freighters.
Yes, I've just returned from the 114th annual meeting of the Freighters, which is the oldest ministers group in the UUA. It was started by 114 years.
And so, wow. So wait, let's contextualize. It was started
1902 by a group of Universalist ministers.
Universalists, okay.
And they meet yearly at the Wayside Inn out in Sudbury, which is this 18th century inn. It's celebrating its 300th anniversary this year. So and we meet in the old kitchen, and papers are given. I mean, it's the other thing too is that it's a study group, but it's also sort of a relational group, and it's limited to the number of beds there are at the inn. So and then once you get a bed, you're in there for life. So you have people who've been members since 1964. Who's
the oldest member now? I mean, the longest standing member.
Jan Knost. He joined in 1964. But David Pohl is probably the oldest of our members, who was many years ago had the position that has become Keith's position, and
lots of other positions too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And he was the minister in Ottawa for a very long time. And he was talking about we were remembering a couple of freighters who have died in the last year or two. Janet Bowering, and how she had when she was at St. Lawrence for seminary, her parents died, and so she ended up living with what's his name? He was a dean there. Scottish last name. Angus MacLean sort of took her in. The MacLean family sort of took her in, and it's just those sort of things you kind of go, oh, right, yeah, and I gave a paper where I talked a bit about Ken Patton, and it was amazing for to have people who knew Ken Patton talk about him.
I remember Ken Patton said.
Yeah, well, yeah, it was the consensus was he should only have written things and never actually spoken to people. I think that was but it was but have that sort of history and shared down to those of us who are serving churches as well as folks who are retired. It really was great.
It's a Universalist group, Hank?
Yeah, it started as Universalist, and Brad Greeley was the first Unitarian that they took on, that they took in.
Was that before merger that he came in, or after merger?
after merger.
Okay. Interesting. Uh-oh,
Yeah.
I think we just lost Keith. He
Oh, no.
couldn't hold the iPad anymore. Poor guy.
His arms came out.
Yeah,
Uh-oh.
his arms came out, and
Came
and
out.
and the iPad smashed to the floor. Well, we'll hope he's back. Speaking of history, I had a really interesting conversation last week. I met with the daughter of Monroe Husbands, and Monroe Husbands, if you'll remember, ran the CLF between 1948 and 1967. He was the guy who founded like 350 fellowships. And his daughter is now almost 80. She lives out in Washington, and I came out to the Seattle area specifically to talk to her. And it was fascinating. I wondered if she would say my dad was just always gone. You know, that was my fear. And she said no, he did 2 one-month trips, one in the fall, one in the spring, and he saw a different group every single night. Keith, I'm talking about Monroe Husbands. He saw a different group every single night. He worked really hard to set them up, and then he did a whole lot of follow-up with them. And this, for people who don't know, they put ads in magazines, this group called the Layman's League, who had a lot of money apparently. They put ads in magazines saying, "Are you a Unitarian?" but don't know it. And then they used the CLF membership to find where there were clumps of people. And so I asked, her name's Bobby Allison, I asked her, you know, why did she think this was so successful? Because really this is the most successful growth endeavor we've ever had. And she said partly it was the time, but she said her father was not a minister. He had trained as an actor, and he was super compelling. He was very dramatic in his presentations. He was like a radical humanist. He'd grown up in the Mormon church and left, and was just super humanist, which we see in the histories of those fellowships. And she said he had a gift for identifying leadership. Like he really could figure out through writing and talking to people even before he got there who would be the best president, who should be in what role. So by the time he left, one night they'd have officers, they'd be ready, he'd have all these templates of, you know, forms and everything ready for him, and they would commit to a fellowship in one night. I mean, it blew my mind. It was really wonderful to meet her. And the one really sad thing to me was he worked for 19 years at the UUA. Apparently he did not get along very well with President Greeley. And he was Dana McLean Greeley, not Brad Greeley, mentioned before, relation, but not the same. And he was fired a year before he would have gotten any pension. So it made me very grateful for our current pension system and retirement program where you're vested after 2 years, because he worked 19. And that just was tragic. I thought that was really sad. So, but she said, she was great. She said, I'm sure he was totally annoying to work with. You know, he sounded actually like my cranky old dad. You know, he would argue theology all the time. He was just, you know, super humanist. And they weren't a good fit. But anyway, just that was the one sad thing. But it was wonderful to meet her, and like you say, Hank, to kind of have that living history. You know, I could read this stuff, but to actually talk to somebody about it was really, really exciting. So how about you, Bob? You've been studying history out there at Meadville?
I actually have. It's funny that this conversation has turned historical, because I just got back from my week at Meadville, 2.5 weeks of Meadville, but the last week was in UU History and Polity with the fabulous Nicole Kirk. And one of the tasks we have to do over the course of the week is give a presentation on a congregation in our area. So I pulled the archive files on the UU Church of Buffalo. It's been around since 1831. It actually merged with the Universalist churches in the area in 1953, 8 years before the national merger. But the thing that was really interesting when you pull these, if y'all ever pass through Chicago and want to pull the archives, first of all, John Leaker and the library staff there, the archive staff, are fantastic. They're totally accommodating. But it's so fascinating to get the stack of files and turn the pages and pull out the onion skin. And so in the 40s, there was a guy who was a prominent member, a pillar of the church, who was also a prominent lawyer in Buffalo, a guy named Wells V. Moot, and he was a partner in the same firm that my father was a law firm in the same law firm. My father was a partner.
M-O-O-T, Moot?
Wells V. Moot. And
Great name.
And he would pepper Frederick Eliot or Samuel Eliot with letters of advice and grousing and all that. He was that kind of congregant. And they had a couple of bad experiences or hires that were mismatches. And Wells v. Moot's chronic complaint was that they were too focused on social justice. This is in the 40s. And so in one letter, this was really great to pull up in the files that, I'm sitting at Meadville, Meadville Lumber Theological School, and in one letter he says, he's grousing to Eliot, he says, after this recent firing and the guy we had before, I think it'll be a long time before we hire a Meadville man again. Which, coincidentally, their brand newly minted settled minister, he was half right. Their brand new settled minister is a Meadville grad, but not a man. It's Joe Montag. And he's working out great at Buffalo. So I guess Wells knew something about what he was talking about.
All's wells that ends wells.
I highly recommend, though, folks, if you're ever passing through Chicago and you want to spend a really entertaining afternoon, pull the file at your home church and learn about why people behave the way they do. The multi-generational memories in our congregations.
They have all the church archives there, Bob?
But when the UUA moved, they transferred the congregational files over to up to the 80s, I believe, over to Meadville to hold. The individual minister files, I believe, reside at Harvard Div at the Andover archives at Harvard Div. But it's so interesting, and actually, this is a great segue to Keith, because in so many ways the stories of the congregations are stories about settled ministers that succeed or fail, and how that went.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking too about how much it's changed since the days that David Pohl was there and basically personally thought through who should go where, and I mean that's just the way it was before the internet in a lot of ways. And I must say people were mad at the UUA a lot in those days, because what person can please even one of our churches is a challenge, but many of them is pretty impossible. Before we go to Keith, I just want to pause for a moment. Our dearly beloved colleague, Ibrahim Farjajeh, Dr. Ibrahim Farjajeh from Star King, who's been faculty, dean of faculty, provost, and is just dearly beloved by many, many thousands of people around the globe, is being held in loving prayer as he really has lingered for quite some time right on the edge of life after a massive heart attack. And I think I speak for many of us when we say we can't imagine a planet without him on it. He's just his heart is literally scattered all over the world. You can see it on Facebook with just all the kinds of prayers coming in, Muslim, Sufi, Jewish, Unitarian, Universalist, Christian. He's just so beloved by so many, and I just want to say I'm holding him and also his partner Catherine and their son Issa deeply in prayer as they go through this time, and may his process lead to healing and more love. That's about all we can say. So anyway, just wanted to get that in. I've known him for a super long time, and I feel, personally like he's beloved to me, and so many people feel that way. He is just so deeply beloved to so many people. So I actually got to know him when I had the same job that Keith had for years, heading the GLBT office, and he reached out. And he reached out as if we'd known each other forever, and that's kind of how it was with him. You were like, oh, I forgot we were friends. Yeah, hi. So that's kind of how he approaches the world. And to walk around with him is really to walk around with a spiritual leader. In Berkeley, just kind of walking the streets with him. Many people who I admit I simply ignore. He speaks to everyone. He speaks to, ranting, drunk people, and he just really is a very unique person. So lifting him up for our movement. So anyway, that's kind of a somber thing to say. I'll transition so Keith doesn't have to pick it up there, because that's kind of awful. To say that also awful but not as sad is that last week, where I live in Minneapolis, though I haven't been there, but on the internet world of Minneapolis, Facebook decided to remove the Black Lives Matter Minneapolis page. They did that after Black Lives Matter called for firing of a police officer who posted not once but several times over actually months and years encouraging his friends to drive into protesters and run over them. And they were suggesting that he should not be police officer, and they got axed, and so did Lena Gardner, who we've had on here from Black Lives UU, who's very active with Black Lives Minneapolis, also on the CLF staff, suddenly had no Facebook page. So those have been reinstated, but it really was sobering about Facebook's decision making about what is and is not appropriate. So just to note, I mean, that was kind of a new one, that by trying to hold someone accountable, you could be deemed that you shouldn't have this. They have, like, you know, I don't know, 50,000 friends or something. I mean, it's a huge page. And
well, to me, the echoes of the Mall of America situation, where you have a private company holding the public space,
yeah,
and
yeah,
then deciding the rules with
yeah,
no accountability.
yeah, that's a really good. Yeah, because we do think of Facebook as public space.
Yeah,
and
we think
use
of
it
it as a
public
utility.
space.
Like, we think of it as a utility, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's not. In fact, and I guess this just really reminded me how much it's not. Keith, are you ambivalent about being here, or what's going on for you, bud?
I don't know. All of a sudden everyone froze. So I fortunately have the link right behind the screen. And,
All right. Well, you
back
can.
on.
Why don't you say something compelling enough that if you disappear again, we can keep talking about it. So how's it going?
No pressure, though.
How's the search? How's it going this year? What are you seeing? How's it going? I know you're getting your steps in by pacing while you talk on the phone.
Okay. Well, this is a search year like no other, and many of you may remember last spring when it looked like we were going to have a shortage of interims. That was actually indicative of a greater shortage, which is one of ministers. And this year we have some 67 congregations in search, and 89 ministers looking for positions. The interesting factor around all of this is around geography. If you're looking in certain places, there are a lot of ministers looking. If you're in Charleston, West Virginia, which, Meg, you know well, or Sioux Falls, South Dakota, at the moment, no one is looking.
Plug for Charleston, West Virginia. Great fellowship there in Charleston, West Virginia.
Charleston, West Virginia is a great congregation, and I visited them in November, and I thought this would be a fantastic place for someone who wants to go, to be appreciated as a minister, to be able to get involved in social justice. There are significant issues there around water and health and all kinds of other social justice issues, and at the moment they don't have anyone interested.
Oh, you make me want to apply at Charleston, West Virginia so bad. Oh, you guys, it's my childhood church. It's great.
Okay, I will take some more steps and call you after the call.
No, not allowed.
So, but what I'm watching right now are some ministers who are willing to go anywhere, all of a sudden having to turn down pre-candidating visits because they only have so many weekends they can do, and they're getting 7 to 9 offers. So it is going to be a search year like no other, and I will be very intrigued to see how it plays out. And I suspect we will have a fair number of congregations who end up without a minister just simply by the numbers this year.
So regionally, so the Midwest is still, and the South are still the least appealing to people, or how do you see it regionally?
Large metropolitan areas are appealing to people. Coasts are appealing to people. You know, one of the factors that is very true is that people are not only looking for themselves; they're looking at where their spouses can work. They're looking for where you know, they're going to be closer to family, or where they can keep their kids in school. So that often makes things very complicated for some people looking at a place like Charleston, West Virginia, or Sioux Falls, South Dakota, because it's not particularly close to something they need, or they're worried their spouse might not be able to get a job. I mean, and ministry has become, more often than not, the second income in a household.
Yeah, well, there's a reason for that, huh? That's really interesting. So so what I've wondered watching, and I'm interested in your chin right now. I'll just say that, Keith. Your arms are wearing out. Is he gone? Oh, there, you're there. It seems like young women are the new guacamole. I mean, is that true, or is it? I mean, it just seems like young women that I know are, okay, 4 of them, but still, that's pretty many, are really getting interviews at a rate that delights me. Young women, kind of. Is that different? Do you see anything different with gender?
Well, what I see with gender is there are just more women in ministry now than men. If you're
Well, all right.
Let's talk about that a little more.
While Keith reboots on, I will say this. So I've now at Meadville, I've seen 3 classes come in, and my class, where the ratio was probably 20% men, the following class, which was maybe 30% men, and the incoming class is probably now closer to 40% men. So I don't know what's going on, and I mean that's just one seminary, one data point, but the trend is back to balance after being heavily female. It seems like.
That's really interesting.
And is it are they young men? Is it sort of a second career men coming into that you see at Meadville? What's the
it's more
age demographics?
This incoming class is more young men. I mean, by young, I mean probably in their 30s, as opposed to old farts like me. So the second career types. So.
Hey Keith, quick, what do you know? I think last time you were on, you and Hank were Tweedledum and Tweedledee with one headset, weren't we?
That's right. Yeah.
Oh my God, really?
Oh Lord.
The hard way.
Huh. So that's really interesting. So what does that dynamic create then? Is it like a frenzy or what?
It's a really good question in terms of what's going to happen. I'm beginning to notice, fear, despair, concern. We're going to have we may become like other denominations that are also dealing with this. We may see regional people serving as ministers for more than one churches at some point down the road. We may have to look at doing something like some sort of UU diaconate, where we figure out things for established lay leaders to pick up pieces within congregations to help them do stuff. Because the problem is not with the number of ministers coming in. The problem is the number of ministers who are retiring. And we have a significant number of older folks who are now feeling like they're in a position where it's time for them to leave. So it's really a replacement issue. And how do we, when in the last 2 years in the Service of the Living Tradition, we had over 60 ministers retire. The 3 years before that, we only had 30 ministers a year retire. So in 2 years, we had 120 ministers retire as opposed to 90 in 3 years, and that just takes a toll.
But is 67 congregations a really unusually high number of congregations to be looking?
We also have a higher number of congregations in search,
so
and that also puts a strain.
So what has that been like? What's the trend with the number of congregations in search?
It varies from year to year. I mean, 2 years ago it was particularly high. Last year we managed match more of the numbers we had for the 2 years before that. Low 50s is about normal. In the upper 60s puts a strain on the system, and it just gets very complicated for congregations to find someone, and then it becomes more complicated in terms of where does a search committee, when it has gotten a mandate from a congregation about what to look for, what happens when you don't see that? I mean, and how patient do you be?
Yeah, and you don't want to end up with calling somebody that's not a good fit. So, yeah, that's
well,
tough.
And I will tell you that calling someone who's a poor fit generally means a short ministry and you're back in search again.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
Let's just do a
it ends
shout
up
out
taking to find
to those
that
search committees. The
Do you
search
think?
committees, they just work their butts off. Let's just say hey to them.
Oh
Thank
yeah,
you for your
yeah, yeah.
work.
Oh yes.
Thank
I
you.
have a special guest star here.
Yay!
You know,
Get the
heads
laptop out. Get out. Where are you?
I'm in, guess where I am? I'm in Boston.
Boston.
I'm at the mothership.
I'll be right down. I'll be right down. Hang on. I'll be right down.
I have to be center of attention, so I can't just let Keith Kron get all the attention. What the hell?
Aisha, I was going to do solidarity with you. I'm on the West Coast, feeling for you how early this is for you every week. My
Right?
goodness.
Right? It is not funny. We need to push this back an hour. Come on now.
Not cute.
Love you guys. I'm on break.
No, Aisha, do the hair thing. Do the hair thing to Keith. Keith is frozen, unfortunately, right at the key moment. Come on.
Oh, Lord.
When she was doing that, it was right when Rachel Drozel was having her moment of epiphany. So she was doing. So Aisha was coming up to guests at GA and doing Rachel Drozel hair to them by surprise.
It was surprising, all right. Well, I'm sorry, the screen froze at just the wrong moment. Okay, so back. Oh, he's gone.
Well, I wonder.
Much hilarity.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I wonder if this will cause some congregations to go out and start to try to snipe and steal ministers who are already serving churches who hadn't gone into search. If all of a sudden a search committee might sort of say, "Hey, have you thought about us?"
Yeah.
As we speak about entrepreneurial ministry, maybe being an entrepreneurial search committee. I mean, one of the things that I have seen, is that I've seen some churches offering salaries, which I wonder if they'd really be able to financially support. There was at least one of the churches that I saw this year. I was like, wow, that's a great that's what a great amount of money they're offering. And then I looked at their numbers, which is part of the congregational record that all congregations put up when they are in search. And I thought, oh, that doesn't quite add up right. They're going to be really trying to figure this all out, and I'm sure they will. But it seemed like a really big jump for them.
Well, it's all part of a growingly complicated picture, because what congregations want and what they can afford, the gap is just going to continue to increase, because as the generation of folks who are older continue to get older, the people who've been doing stuff in congregations, being the backbone of the church, as they age, there aren't necessarily newer folks stepping up in quite the same way. So what congregations are doing is asking staff to do more. And it's like, okay, if you're going to ask staff to do more, you have to pay it. And where do you get the funds to pay for it? It's going to be an interesting problem for people to have to figure out. And it may well be that the next generation of folks just have different needs for church. And so therefore, the structures that currently exist may not exist. But it's all going to be an evolution.
So, whoops.
I have some specific questions that
Okay,
I could set aside.
You go with your specific questions.
What I've seen this a few, and I'm in a few places, and I wonder if this has been your experience, Keith. That I saw the survey results of from one congregation, and they talked about. Well, actually, let me back up and sort of say one of the things that's interesting. It used to be that a church would put up their congregational record, and then they would receive a minister's record, and then if they liked each other, they would then send an email with links to their own packets. This year, for the first time, I saw congregations putting the link to their packet on their congregational record. So they're sort of skipping ahead. They're sort of saying, like, you like this? Just go and see our full packet right here, which I thought was very interesting, sort of very bold, and I certainly know of ministers who, as soon as a congregation might have contacted them, were like, great, and here is my whole here's my packet. You've read that, So I wonder if how that's changing things. But where I was going was that at least one congregation said, here are our survey results. One of the things you will notice is that the people who filled out the whole survey tended to be over 50 years old. We actually have a whole lot of younger millennials and Gen Xers, but they didn't fill out the survey. And there's a part of me that wonders if, especially with millennials, they are a generation of folks who've taken lots of tests. They might just be really tired of taking a lot of tests. It may also just be, maybe it's a boomer thing, who love to take surveys about themselves and find out who they are. I wonder if in a few years, if we won't have to have everybody who's on Facebook join, and then we get their sort of the biorhythms of the things they like, and just kind of and do it that way, or trick congregations into like what what Hogwarts house would you go into, and then have in there like hidden questions about what the burning coal in their congregation is, and that will send them into Gryffindor or whatever. But or are the surveys just getting too long? What if a huge portion of the folks, especially the folks people want in their congregations, aren't filling out the surveys? What are we thinking about?
Gosh, where do I start with all of that? I think it's all true, actually, and on some level that we're going to slowly see this change. I do think that congregations are actually relying a little bit more on focused conversations with specific groups of people for information. I think that's a particularly useful thing. So it's like we want to have a conversation with the young adult group. We want to have a conversation with the senior lunch bunch, or whatever the particular group is in a particular congregation, as a way just to generate ideas, because the other plus around.
Now I'm wondering what the other plus is going to be.
What is the other plus? Let's guess what the other plus might be. Hank?
Well, I wonder, one thing, Hank, you're muted, but
yeah, thanks. Sorry, yeah. I was going to say better hair. That's what I was going to say. But
I'm confused by, well, what's going on? I mean, Keith said, I'm sorry, I'll pass while I compose my question because I'm just fumbling around.
One of the interesting things that that happened at the Freighters is that I ended up we were hoping to have a guest come in and talk, but they weren't able to make it. So I actually did a presentation around with a bunch of ministers about the search process, and I pulled up my congregational record, my ministerial record, and because for some of these folks, obviously who are retired and they haven't used the online dating thing, and it was it was sort of fun, and I wonder if maybe we should be working more towards sort of like an app, like a Tinder app, but it'd be called like I don't know, minister app, with no e, it'd just
Minder.
be like Minder, and left swipe, right swipe humanist, left swipe I don't know, whatever. If but like how small can we get there?
Remember, we want to hear what the other positive thing is. Keith, you left us hanging. What is it? Do you remember what you were saying when you got cut off?
No, because I don't know when I got kicked off.
You said the other positive thing, and boom.
The other positive thing about these small groups talking to one another is that when you get the groups together, people say stuff that they then build on. And so people think about their church in different ways. It's like, oh, I hadn't thought about that. Yes, I really would like someone who, really would like a minister who has good boundaries or is good at preaching about spiritual stuff or whatever it is. I mean, and when people are in their own little surveys, you get just a very, quick snapshot of where someone is at a moment, as opposed to letting people's ideas build on one another.
Well, here's
which
something
I actually way more rich and way more valuable.
This conversation made me wonder this. For those of us who are old, Peter Rabel wrote a book called How to Case a Church decades ago that was just like this little stapled thing. And it was like subscribe to the local paper and, well, I mean, I assume, like, has somebody written how to use social media to stalk a church? Because there is so much you can find out online now about all kinds of stuff about churches. And I presume that's now a huge part of the search process for both the ministers and the churches, that they're checking out what each other have done online. Are you seeing that that has any impact on it? You're shaking your head no, that's not happening?
Well, it's having a huge. I'm shaking my head no to various things that come to my mind because and I'm not even going to talk about one of them because it'll just plant ideas in people's head. But people are doing all kinds of stalking. Hank, I don't even want to think about what you're thinking about right now, I'm sure. But people are doing all kinds of stalking on churches. We tell churches as soon as you're announced in search, people are going to begin looking at your website. You might want to start there and look and see if it needs sprucing up. We now have a template for congregations for websites that Carrie McDonald developed that I think can be really helpful. We're going to be working on a template for ministers and congregations in search to have, because there's some basic things that we're going to want as we move forward on all of this.
And I think sometimes some ministers, I mean it's online, can create, you can have a fantastic website and be kind of a dud, and so like certainly when I at the Freighters when I was talking to them about search, they were worried about like somebody who might be really great but not have the money or the technical abilities to make a really great web page, and they were saying, wow, we have this this new thing they do for churches and websites, could we do that for ministers as well, so.
Yeah, and that's sort of the hope. And the other thing that we're hoping, though, it gets interesting. We've been talking about this. Is how inclusive of video should we be as part of the new packet? And people, for the most part, are all for it. I, of course, raised the idea when all of a sudden you look at someone and you have that Malcolm Gladwell blink moment where you make a decision about them just from their appearance.
Yeah.
How do we get around that as well? If they look at someone and it's like they have gray hair, or they're large, or they're a person of color, and all of a sudden all of these biases that they don't think they have come into play that affect their decisions. So how do we take that into a part of getting people to look objectively at who their best minister might be? Because I really think, for example, right now when we do the beyond categorical thinking, two concerns come up as much as anything else. We don't want a minister who's overweight is always one of them. No, we don't want a minister with disability because they're not going to have the stamina.
They won't be able to have,
gone again.
Yeah, that they won't have the stamina, and also it's certainly in some of our historic churches. Here in Milton we have this fantastic pulpit with a staircase, two staircases that go up to the pulpit. And although they a few years ago they created this lovely area in front of the pulpit where most of the worship service is led, there are people who sort of say like, oh, we want to make sure we have people who can get up and down, up into our beautiful pulpit, so there's those issues. And one of the other things too that I've heard, and we can certainly bring back when Keith comes back on, is that, hey Keith, you're back.
Yeah, apparently when I get in a rant, it doesn't like it.
When that happens with me, it's Meg who cuts me off, so I don't know what's happening. One of the things that that I'm wondering is, I've heard this from our colleagues of color, that they get lots of when they're in search, they've got lots of pre-candidate, because I think search committees feel like they want to make sure that they have they've taken the beyond categorical thinking workshop, and so we'll get a person of color to come, but the people of color don't end up being called to the pulpits. They may be called to assistant ministers, but there's very few, ministers who are called, to be the senior ministers, or at least, the primary minister in congregations. And what do you see around how that will, how that's what direction that's going in?
Well, one of the things that has changed, because I had noted that too when I first came on, is that ministers of color are actually far more targeted in the places they search than white ministers are. I mean, I wish everyone did their homework as well as our ministers of color do around looking for places where they can potentially serve.
and you know, I really make sure that people feel like they can reach out for the information that they need on that. So we're seeing more targeted searches and a higher success rate, but that's because people are doing their homework and really checking out, is this a great place for me to look at, you know, how much am I going to have to deal with? Are they going to take me seriously? Are they bringing me in just for show, or are they really open to the idea? And I think, you know, and I look, you know, last year I immediately look at, you know, Manish Mishra Mazardi coming to Lincoln, Massachusetts, and Patrice, who's former co-host here on The View, in Clearwater, both of whom, you know, the top choices of both their search committees, and, you know, exciting to see progress. So, you know, it's still an issue, and it's one we continue to work on because it's not going to go away. I mean, you know, I keep going back to Meg at the beginning, talking about, you know, the differences between the way a Black Lives Matter movement is treated on Facebook versus, you know, the ranchers in Oregon, and it's sort of like, how is race not a part of this particular conversation?
And speaking for fat people, let me just say, no one has ever complained about my stamina, ever. So that, I did not realize that people were being
too much stamina.
Right. People have complained about that, actually. Yeah.
I wish you'd get tired once in a while as your employee.
I hadn't realized people were verbalizing that one. That's interesting.
Well, you know, and I think it really matters. It's like, for what I would say for most UUs, it's like they get to know someone, and it's like, you know, they no longer see a person as a single story, but it is when you encounter someone for the first time and you only know them as that single story, that's where we see those moments of discrimination.
Are people still doing beyond categorical thinking?
Most every congregation does it. And what's interesting is they are far more receptive to it than they were when I started doing these 20 years ago. I hear less and less, we don't need to do this, or why are we doing this, and more of, you know, we would really need to talk about that. And I take that as a positive sign.
Yeah, that's all about things like implicit bias being discussed publicly. Yeah,
right.
Great.
And that's where I think things like the Black Lives Matter movement, and you know, all the marriage equality stuff, and all the work around transgender, really have made a difference as people begin to see some of the layers of the way that oppression works. Where we still have work to do, interestingly enough, is around disability and mental health issues.
We have a lot of work to do. I know a seminarian who was turned down for an internship gig, who was thoroughly qualified, except that this seminarian could not climb up into the pulpit.
Right.
And that was stated to the seminarian by the minister at that church.
Right. It's like,
how, yeah. So, how about trans folk? How's that going?
You know.
Well, let's meditate on that for a moment.
Yeah.
There are more and more trans folk. Hank, just so you know, we're getting word from viewers that we're not live.
Oh.
And we haven't been live.
So we can go back and we can edit some stuff that I said before.
Can, well, I guess many people. Did Lori respond?
No. I pinged her, but I haven't heard back yet. But I am at a loss. I mean, here it says we're live. We're broadcasting.
I wonder. I don't know. It happened last week, but Lori caught it really early and did something.
And if it is live and you're watching this, or if you're watching this later on, we're really sorry that we're talking about how the sausage factory works right now and what's going on. Oh my gosh. Oh, Keith's back. Good.
Keith's back. So, trans folk.
Right. What I feel like I can talk about without, because there's so few trans ministers in the process that, you know, compared to some of the other identities, is that there have been some shifts in the Beyond Categorical Thinking workshop in terms of the way people talk about this. From people going to, I have no idea what transgender is, to now saying, I would be concerned about having a minister who cross-dressed every Sunday in the pulpit. I mean, so you get more.
Well, it's progress, I guess.
It's a strange progress, but at least it's a step. And when they think about someone who, for example, who has transitioned, or someone who is genderqueer, there is less befuddlement and more people who understand what that is.
Mm-hmm.
I think more and more folks are aware, either from their congregation or from their lives, of someone who's trans in their lives. You know, they've heard enough stories, seen enough things, so it's not the mystery that it once was, and there's still a fair amount of work to do, and that's going to be a continued part of the work that we have to do, I think, because one of the things that I sort of think about and talk about, as more and more people get comfortable with identifying as trans, you're just going to have more and more folks out there who we all know are going to be part of our congregations.
Yeah,
and more and more people interested in ministry.
Especially among younger people for whom there's been a revolution.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And a younger person looking at a church, if they don't see something that's trans inclusive, why would they go?
Yeah. And how about theological diversity? What do you say? Are you seeing people hard, soft on that? How's that?
Previous conversation, same one, different topic. Age matters. And the places where we're most rigid are among some of our longer time older UUs. The places where we're least rigid are the people who are newer to Unitarian Universalism.
So all this is playing out then that the deciders, the choosers on behalf of the church are probably the older people who have the ability to participate in search. We just talked about what an obligation a search committee is, and they may not be bringing in the person who's going to bring in the people who are going to save the life of the congregation. Is that? Am I overreaching on that?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Because I do watch congregations be very intentional about making sure that they have more diversity on the congregation, that there's age diversity, that there's gender diversity, even race diversity now, because they want to make sure that the entire church is represented. Now, within the search committee, who actually has more say, and if some people are listened to more than others, that will vary widely. But I do see an intentionality more and more on the part of congregations of it cannot be just a group of retirees who are making this decision.
Right, because often they often act more as gatekeepers than thinking of new things, which is certainly right, and it's they're often thinking about their services right now. There's I've certainly seen and heard the amount of anxiety from congregations about the future of church, and people really going, we need a parish minister who's going to stay here for a long time and maybe has a family and will raise the kids in the in the church and in the community, and we want them yesterday, and so people, I've certainly seen interims going. All of a sudden, there were a number of one-year interims last year, which I was sort of surprised at. And certainly there was at least one congregation that didn't go with an interim year at all, even though I guess they knew that their minister was going to be leaving. But just that anxiety that we won't be able to find anybody because we want things how they are right now to keep going, as opposed to really sort of sitting down and going what's our vision of this place, and let's have an aspirational search committee, that sort of thing. So it's.
This week, another interesting conversation I had. I went to my college that I graduated from, Reed College, and met with Professor Mary Dean, who's now in charge of diversifying the faculty there. It was so white when I was there, which I've complained about.
Oh no! Now Meg's gone. Oh no!
All right, it's just you and me, Frank.
It's you and me, buddy. All right. Well.
Hi. What's up,
I don't care about Reed College. Let me tell you that right now. And
I've complained about re-college a lot myself.
Yeah, and I think it certainly I think as there's always a churches wanting to do right, and it's difficult, and as someone who's been settled and been in search and is doing interim stuff, it's you sometimes wonder, like, what are they thinking? What were they, how did that happen? And sometimes it makes, and it works out great, and other times you kind of go, oh no, and well, it's
a bewildering world. I just feel like somehow perhaps the number of changes and pressures we're experiencing, both in broader society and as a movement, are creating all these mismatches and just making it so much. So here's the thing. I'm a third year. I have people who went through the MFC successfully in December, who went into search, and who were so stunned when they clicked that button after I guess you just toggle through and click on a few congregations, who clicked that button at 9 a.m. and were getting phone calls at 2 p.m. that day, and and were shot from a cannon into the search process. And the funny thing is, like, when you're in seminary, the conversation is all MFC all the time. It's just like, what the hell? Get through the MFC, get to the MFC. And then people are realizing, like, whoa, the MFC was nothing. The big show is search. So I have to get a package together, and it's the level of intensity is way beyond. I mean, MFC is a controlled environment compared to the crucible that is search.
Yeah, and I think also there's also the thing to remember too, is that this is just the beginning. You go through the MFC, you're like, oh, I've reached the end, I've finished the MFC. And you're like, oh no, wait, now this is just the beginning of this whole ministry. And so yeah, no, it's definitely that feeling of trying to get it all up and running. One of the stories
now. I mean, and I'm exhausted, and I haven't started.
Keith's going to like this story. Jan Knost, who is right now serving as interim minister down in South County, Rhode Island, his father was a minister as well down in Alabama, and his father and his mom realized that the high school that he and his brother were at wasn't credentialed, and if they were going to graduate and get into college, they would need to go someplace else. So Jan's father had a good friend who was the minister in Peoria, Illinois, and called him up and sort of said, hey, I need my kids to go to a good high school. What would you think about you and me switching churches? And so the guy up there was like, I'm thinking about retiring and moving to a smaller church. Perfect. So the two of them switched churches. They checked in with their boards. The board said, okay, sure. So they switched churches. And Clinton Lee Scott one day was calling for the other minister in Peoria and picked up the phone, and he's like, oh, is Billy there? And he's like, no, he's not there. Well, who is this? Well, this is Knost. Well, what are you doing in Illinois? Oh, we switched churches. And he's like, you didn't tell me you switched churches? You just did this on your own? What are you doing? So it could be a bit more Wild West out there. I guess that's what I'm saying, Keith.
We're doing polity, baby. All right, so I just spent a week in UU History and Polity with Nicole. So, I mean, these are all polity questions, right? Really?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So driven by our unique structure. Part of me would just love a bishop to just tell me where to go right now.
Yeah, I'll tell you where to go.
And we're actually seeing more of that. We're actually seeing more of that, Bob. That's very interesting, because I actually think we're moving, a little bit away from the wild west on some level, and people just wanting more help and more guidance. And some of that I really think is about timing and how much time people have, and how quickly this process moves through, and there are just so many variables and factors that all of a sudden we feel like we have to be in control of, that it's just easier to kind of go, can you just do it for us?
Right. I often think about that too. I'd like to have a bishop pull somebody else out of a church and put me in there. That's if you could work that out, Keith, that's what I would be happy with.
And there actually are people who would like me to sort of be that bishop, that cardinal who does that.
Yeah, so they could all be mad at you.
I think that's actually part of it, Meg. I think that's right. It's like, as
they
opposed to taking
to
responsibility, if we can have someone to blame, it's much easier.
Yeah. Yeah. My mother, her friend lost her husband after many years, and she said to her, "What do you miss most?" And her friend said, "I miss having someone to blame." Well, there's something to that. So, speaking of someone to blame, this is an official apology. Many people have been texting and writing and saying that we're not live. We don't know why that happened. You will be listening to this later if you're listening to it. We will have edited out all of the personally defaming. No, we're not going to take. I mean, it is a show. But I apologize. I have no idea. We're going to be trying to figure out why this didn't show. And thanks to those of you who reached out, and we do apologize. And again, hats off to search committees. We're coming up. We got just a couple more minutes. Keith, was there anything you wanted to say that we didn't bring up that you feel like you really missed the point by not asking me that?
You know, the big thing for me that I'm continually concerned about is the supply of available ministers for congregations, and what that means, and the effects that will have on congregations, and how to help people manage whatever anxieties they have about anything so that they can make good decisions. I mean, what I feel like I've really tried to focus on for 6 years is trying to create a process that at least allows people to make good decisions based on whatever is real, because anxiety really causes people to make bad decisions, and we can all make better decisions when we're less anxious and we know what's going on.
When will the congregational record pages be? Oh, he knew I was going to ask a tough question and he dropped out. The congregational record pages and the ministerial record pages are the same ones from 16 years ago. Those questions need to get updated and all that sort of stuff. So I'd love to have that. Tell us who's coming on.
Let's give him more jobs while he isn't here. Anything else?
Exactly. Yeah.
I think that idea of a website for ministers that they can, like a template, that's a great one.
Yeah.
Keith, while you were gone, we gave you more jobs. Hank wants you to update the congregational record sheets.
Just
I mean,
you know.
What
questions. There are questions on there about parsonages that I kind of go, oh my gosh,
Right. Boy. In theory, we're negotiating with a consulting company right now to redo the entire settlement system, and all of this will be revised once we figure all that out, because there's no point in tinkering with it now and then tinkering it again with it a year later.
And in theory, we're live, so theories are good. Anyway, thanks so much, Keith, for being with us. It's always fun to have you.
Sure.
Clearly, we feel comfortable teasing you and having a good time as you are doing this very hard work and working long hours. So even though we act like it's just all fun, I just want to take my hat off really for the really steadfast and the way that you have in many roles served congregations for many years, but just really watching, it's so fun to have known you so long and to see you really at the top of your game like this. And helping our movement in a difficult time. So your own non-anxious presence, I think, is really important right now. So next week we're going to have UUA President Peter Morales with us.
Hey!
And we're going to hope to be live. We're going to shoot to be live. The week after that we'll have an introduction to the two candidates for the presidency. They'll each be here for half an hour. So I hope you can come and watch us live. Otherwise, obviously, podcasts are a great way to go. And for Keith holding the iPad this week, I think a very good way to go, because that looked hard. We watched a lot of your shirt and other things.
Yeah. Anyway, I'll figure it out better for next time.
Not by a hair of my chinny chin chin.
My mother always said that I have a face for radio.
Ho!
All right. Take care, everyone. See you next time.
Bye-bye. Thank you.